Namaskaram everyone, I am Gaurav from tweak.dev and in this video we will be learning about events in terms of web development. So first let us understand what are events to begin with. So any interaction that is happening on our website, for example, I'm moving this mouse, this is an event. I'm pressing a key, that's an event. I'm clicking a button, that's an event. And basically any sort of interaction that I'm doing within the application that can be represented or it can be captured as an event, and JavaScript allows me to respond to that event and I can perform or take a certain action when that event happens. So for example, when I click on I'm feeling lucky, there is logic written over here whenever this button is clicked. So we can respond to this click event by loading this page, right? So that's how it has been coded. Now let us look at some coding examples so that you can understand this concept in a better way. So over here we have three elements, okay? There's a parent element, there is a child element, and then there's a grandchild, okay? So let's look at the code for this. So we have a div which has the ID parent, then we have a child, and then we have a grandchild. Now suppose we want to attach a click event to this parent element. What I will do over here is get that element by ID, okay? Document dot get element by ID. The ID is parent, and we want to listen to the click event, so we will add an event listener, okay? And over here we specify the name of the event. In our case it is click, and the next parameter is the function or the handler, okay? It represents the function which will be called when this event occurs. So the browser will raise the click event when the user clicks on this element, and we specify a handler. So this handler will be called when this event occurs. All right, so let's create a function, okay? Const handle parent click, okay? And it receives the event object. And for now, let's just log in the console, okay? Parent clicked. All right, and let's specify this function over here. Let's save this. Let's go back and let me open the developer tools. Now when I click on the parent, it's basically calling the event handler, and this statement is being logged, okay? You can see over here parent clicked. If I click on it again, it's logging it again. Right now we learned how to attach an event handler, okay? The next thing is we can also remove these events, all right? And to do that, let's do one thing. Let's create a button over here, okay? And let's give it an ID remove, okay? Remove event. And what we will do is we will say document dot get element by ID remove, okay? And then we add an event listener to this. So we want to listen to the click event, and then when this button is clicked, what we want to do is we want to get the parent element, okay? So document dot get element by ID parent, and then we want to remove the event listener which is click, and we pass the function that was listening to this event. Let me save this. Let's go back to the browser. You can see this button over here. When I click on this parent, okay, it's logging this. Now let me click on remove event. Let me click on this again. It's not doing anything. Okay, that means we have successfully removed the event handler. So we are no longer listening to the click event on this element. Okay, the next important thing is understanding the event object. If you see this, when I'm passing this function, it's calling this function with the event object. This event object, it contains information about that event. Let's also log this event in the console. Okay, and let me save this. Now when I click on this, you can see that this is a mouse event. All right, one of the important properties that we want to focus on is called the target. Basically it represents the element on which this event occurred. Okay, so in our case it's this parent div. This parent div is the element on which the click event happened. Okay, so this is the target. Then you also see the type of the event, and you see this x and y coordinates. It represents the position, the x and y coordinates on the screen where the click happened. So suppose I click in this corner, we'll get different x and y values. So you can see this over here. Okay, so if you want to do any sort of computation as to where the mouse was clicked, you can make use of these values. Another important concept with regards to event is the order in which these event handlers are executed. So there are two ways in which an event handler can be executed. The first one is known as the event capturing phase. So the handlers are executed as the event is being captured. So that generally happens in a top-down approach. That is, the event is captured at the parent first, then the child, and then the grandchild. And the second approach is known as event bubbling. And in that case, the handlers are executed in a bottom up approach. That is, first it's executed for the child, then its parent, and then its parent. So the event is basically bubbled up. Okay, this is the order in which the event is bubbled up or propagated up, and in case of capturing, the order is in this way. A simple analogy to remember what bubbling means is you can consider an air bubble. So for example, if you're underwater and you breathe, so the air bubbles always rise up. So that's how you can remember event bubbling. Okay, so it's always a bottom up approach. So first we will be looking at event bubbling, because that's the default way a browser executes these event handlers. All right, so let's begin with event bubbling first. To understand that, let me add event handlers to this child element as well as this grandchild element. Okay, so let's duplicate these functions. Okay, let's call this as handle child click, and this one as grandchild click. Okay, let's format this slightly. So %c comma, let's give it a color which is orange, and let's give it a slightly large font size. In this case it is let's give it 1.75 rem. Let me copy this statement, paste this here, and let's give it as child click. Let's give it the color which is the font of blue. Okay, and then let me change the font size to 1 rem. Right, and And this has a point size of 1.25. Okay, let's get all of these elements. So it's child and grandchild. Let's give it handle child click, handle grandchild click. Okay, let me get rid of this and this. Let me save this. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is click on the grandchild. All right, so we have parent, child and grandchild. I will click on this, and what you will see is that it's raising the click event or executing the click event handler for each of these elements. Okay, but we have just clicked on the child, the grandchild, but it's also raising the click event for the child as well as the parent element. The way this is happening is that this element propagates the click event from this to its parent, which is this element, and this in turn propagates the click event to its parent. All right, so bubbling always happens in this direction. Now let's understand what is event propagation. Now if you see over here, when I click on, let me clear this, when I click on child, this event is being propagated up. So child, its parent, and then its parent. Now suppose I only want this click event to be fired for this element and not these two elements. What I will do is in the handle grandchild click, I will write event dot stop propagation. All right, now when I click on this, it's only raising the event on this element, and the propagation has been stopped, so it's no longer bubbling these events upwards. All right, and when I click on child, it's still raising the event for the child as well as its parent. Now let me get rid of this. As I had explained earlier, there's an event.target property. Now let me click on this grandchild, and we are also logging the event object. Now let's look at the event object for the grandchild. If you see the target, it's basically this element, okay, this p tag. Now let's look at the target for this one. It's again the same element because this is the element which has raised this event. And even for the parent, if you see, the target will be this p tag because this is the element which, you know, caused this event to happen. So this is the target. If I click on the child, okay, if we look at the target now, it will be this p tag, which is this element, and even the target for the parent will be this element. It's the same element, okay? And if I just click on the parent, then in this case it will be the parent element. So the target property always represents the element on which the event occurred. All right, now let's look at how we can change this default behavior of bubbling to capture instead. Now suppose we wanted to capture all of these events in the capture phase. What we need to do is provide the capture flag and set it to true. By default it is false, so let me save this. I've just enabled the capture on the parent. Now let's look at how the logging will happen. I'm still clicking on the grandchild, but if you see now, it's saying parent clicked, right? And then it's saying grandchild clicked, and child click. This is happening because the grandchild and child are still listening on the bubbling phase, whereas the parent is being handled on the capture phase. All right. Now, if I were to say event dot stop propagation on this, okay, e dot stop propagation, let me click on this. You can still see that the parent click is called because this is listening to the capture phase, so the direction is this way, right? So the parent still gets the event, the grandchild gets the event because it's it's happening, but the child, okay, if you see, there's no log statement for the child because the grandchild isn't bubbling this event up, right? Because we stopped its propagation. Now let's see what happens when I type event dot stop propagation on the parent, right? Let me click on grandchild, okay, and now it just says parent clicked. That's because it's not allowing this event to propagate, right? The capture phase happens in the capture phase. When you're listening in the capture phase, it's always in a top-down hierarchy, right? So this element captures this event, but it doesn't allow this event to propagate further down. All right, so that's why it's just only the parent click statement is being logged. Okay, so that's how you can do it. Let's also see the behavior for other elements when we say capture true, and let me say capture true. Okay, let me comment this out. And for the grandchild, it still says event dot stop propagation, but still we are going to get all the log statements. So I'm clicking on the grandchild. So you can see it says parent click, child click, and grandchild click. The order is like this because the direction is this way whenever you're listening to the capture phase. Okay, and let me get rid of this. Okay, so we are back to the default behavior now when I click on the grandchild, only this one is being called. That's because we are stopping its propagation. Let me comment that out. Now when I click on this again, the behavior is working as before. The events are bubbling up. Right, so the final thing that we want to understand in this tutorial is event.prevent default. To understand that, what I'm going to do is comment all of this out. Okay, let me add a input text element. Okay, let me give it a name, say name, and also the ID as name, and let me comment out all of this code. Let's save all of this. Okay, so now we just have a text box. What we will do now is we will get this element by ID. So document dot get element by ID, which is name. We will listen to the add event listener. In this case, we want to listen to the key press event. Okay, and we will pass a event listener. So it's telling us we'll get the keyboard event. Okay, let's call it as keyboard event. All right, let me log this keyboard event. Oops, not this. keyboard event. Let's save this. Let's go back. Now let me press A. So this event is being recorded in the console. So you can see that the code is key A, the key is A. Let me do one thing. Instead of logging this entire event, let me just log the key. Okay, let's save this. Let's go back. Let me type something. So the key is A, B, C. Okay, tree.def. All right, so it's logging all of these keys. Now suppose what we want to do is we want to do a validation that you cannot enter any special characters like plus or minus in this text box. Okay, so what we will do is we will come over here, we will get the value. All right, so let's get the key in a variable. So const key. Okay, so we'll say keyboard event. Then what we will do is, suppose we don't want this plus and minus to be typed in the text box, so you'll say if key is equal to plus or key is equal to minus. What we want to do is we do not want this, sorry, keyboard event dot prevent default, right? So what we want to do is we do not want these keys to be typed. So when this happens, we will say keyboard event dot prevent default. Okay, so this will prevent the default behavior from happening. Let's also log this in the console. Key. Okay, now let me press something, for example T. So it's logging that in the console. The next thing that I want to do is I'm pressing the plus sign. It's logging that in the console, but let me zoom this slightly. So let me press plus, so it's actually logging that in the console. Now let me press minus, it's logging that in the console. Sorry, minus, so it's logging that in the console, but it's not typing it over here. That's because we are saying whenever plus or minus key is pressed, we do not want the default behavior to happen. Okay, so it doesn't raise it doesn't allow this event to happen basically. So the default behavior is that this key is shown in the text box, but when we say prevent default, the key is not shown in the text box. Well, thanks for watching, and that is it for this video. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with others, and until we meet again,